We're back. So excited to talk to Mark Squibb again. Now, listen. If you missed my last interview with Mark, he is the inventor of Live O2, and you might not know all about it yet, okay? So we're going to start at the beginning of this conversation with Mark just kind of telling us briefly what Live O2 is, and then we're going to get into sleep and how Live O2 can help with sleep, because I know you all have a real problem. I mean, I'm speaking to the whole public of America here, that we have a real problem with sleep in this country. People are waking up, they can't go to sleep, they're not sleeping enough. And so I'm really interested to learn more about how Mark helps people with this issue. So there's a lot we can talk about today, but I'm going to bring Mark on. Mark, welcome to Naturally Inspired Radio. Good to see you again.
Well, glad to be back.
Yeah, let's kind of, I want to kind of give, because we have new audience members listening today. I know you were on, a couple weeks ago, but I want to update them on what Live O2 is. So can you tell us a little bit about what it is, and then we'll get into how it can improve sleep?
Okay. Every cell in your body has a battery, and it has an engine. And the input to the engines in your cells is just like the input to the engine in your car, which is it burns fuel without oxygen. Okay, so Live O2 is a system that delivers massive amounts of oxygen to your cells and restores optimal performance. So we have, well north of 10,000 systems, and most people, when they use the product, will end up experiencing a 15 to 25 year restoration or rollback in their health status, because it oxygenates and it brings back a big part of the body to the way it used to work. And then the other thing that we have a lot of results with is in terms of cognitive and brain function. So by reoxygenating the brain and getting it working really well, most people will, if you measure their IQ, they'll score between 5 and 15% increase in brain function, which is measurable as functional IQ. And that's just helping the body work like it's supposed to. And the easiest way to say how much better is to think about how you felt 15, 25 years ago. And Live O2 will usually take you back there within a pretty short period of time.
Wow, it's fascinating. Can you touch on like heavy metal exposure? Because we've been talking a lot about autism today, and that we're going to get a big announcement in September. So we don't know what causes autism yet, but it sounds like we're going to get a big announcement in September. And do you have any experience with that? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I wrote a book on it. And if I can be just a little crude, I was standing in a urinal right next to Del Bigtree, and I looked at him and I said, "You have any idea why they're doing this? This is pursuant to the release of the movie Vaxxed." And anyway, so after I had that conversation with him, I worked with the Dr. Andrew Molden, and we more or less laid out the etiology of autism, and I can explain it in under 5 minutes.
Wow. And I think you have a link for that, right? I think Jason's going to put it in the chat.
Yeah, I just shared it. It's called Vaccines Mechanism of Injury. And I went through, and so, with respect, I know that's not the day's topic, but the mechanism, and I don't know, Dr. Andrew Molden, I wrote this paper back in about 2008. And I was working with Dr. Molden and a guy named Frank Hartman, who is the grandfather of zeta potential. And Dr. Molden had documented many, many cases of post-injection situations where children would go into symptoms of severe stroke. And once I knew that, I was like, I see what's going on. So the mechanism is, number one, there's an injection of or consumption of a substance called it crashes the zeta potential, which eats up all the electrons in the blood, and then the blood all sludges up. Once the blood sludges, it won't pass through the tiny vessels. Okay, and if it blocks the vessels for 90 minutes, then it triggers a downstream inflammation that closes down the capillaries, to the point where blood won't go through there anymore. Afterwards,
Mm.
the blood clumping breaks up and you can't see
Hmm.
the cause. But the only thing that's left is the downstream occlusion in the capillary beds, which happens a lot in the brain and throughout the body, which is why autism is a systemic disorder. So when the zeta potential is crashed due primarily to aluminum and other adjuncts, then that effectively shuts down a big part of the brain as well as the remainder of the body. So, this is, we published this in 2008.
Right. That's what I was talking about earlier on the show. There's a lot of this. It's going to be an interesting month, September, because a lot of this stuff, it's like they're getting people ready for the information. I feel like they're slowly like, oh, we're putting together like the information. It's like a lot of this information we've had for a very long time, and that should piss people off. And it should also make people push on other things, and make sure that they're not taking, assumed knowledge from agencies, whether they're professionals. Because Mark, they're pivoting right now from, the CDC being the standard, the gold standard of advice, to professional agencies, which is your American Association of Pediatrics and your AMA and all of those, because they still have capture over those. Right. So, I mean, I think it's great you're talking about this, but I want people to understand, like, it is truly time to do your own critical thinking on these issues.
Well, I mean, just as a closing comment, I watched how hard they beat up Del Bigtree and Andrew Wakefield. I mean, these guys, were hardcore, and I so respected their work. And the least I could do is come along and explain the physiology behind it. And that's one of the things that led me down this path. One of my sons was injured by similarly before I really woke up, and I was able to. You met him. Okay,
Yeah.
nothing wrong these days, but
Yeah.
just this is part of the system, and it was one of the that experience was one of the things that sort of led me down the path. Okay, so um, I guess that we did want to talk about sleep, and it
Yes,
turns
I
out
do
that
want to talk
all of
about
this
sleep.
physiology is related. And I've been writing on these topics. I wrote this original paper in 2008, which is coming up on 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. Fascinating. So let's introduce that topic before we go to break here. Tell me a little bit about sleep. Why do you think people are struggling with sleep? First of all, because a lot of people are. So is it lifestyle? What are the things contributing to people's inability to get good sleep these days?
Well, by my calculation, their bodies are broken in somewhere between 6 and 7 different ways. So, what I was going to do is actually go into functional etiology of the
Hmm.
energetic processes that prevent people from actually going in, to transition into the state of sleep, which is, you
Okay.
go from awake to asleep, the mind goes to sleep, the body's physiology changes, and there are several obstacles to this. So with LiveO2, we address a big number of these, and we also end up making some dietary recommendations. So we're going to address fats, which you just talked about, and how everybody has for the longest time abandoned neutral lipids or butter fat, animal fat in preference of unsaturated fatty acid. It turns out that the cell membrane and all of that physiology is related. So I'm going to be going through, I don't know, 6 or 7 different failure modes in the body that lead to crappy sleep and how they're fixable.
Okay. Great. Okay. Do we have a slide then before we go? We got to go to
Yeah,
break at 44. There we go.
okay. All right. So I roll this into a thing. So metabolic and energetic perspective on sleep. So next slide, please. Um, so one of the first obstacles to sleep I call respiratory sleep apnea. I actually went out to the AI and I found it. But basically, if you look at the image on the right there, what you'll see is there's parts of that image that are colored red. Okay, the parts of this body are, that red represents this capillary inflammation that prevents blood from flowing through major organs and systems. What happens is as people age, this inflammation, blood obstruction piles up or accumulates and blocks. Okay, when you try to sleep, those tissues that don't have an oxygen supply stop producing carbon dioxide overnight. When they do,
Okay.
trigger your normal respiratory process so your body forgets to breathe.
Okay, we'll come back to this slide as soon as we come back. We're talking about respiratory apnea with Mark Squibb. Live02.com, 970-658-2789. As you can tell, it's going to be a very interesting conversation, so you want to stay tuned. Call your friend. We'll be right back. We're talking to Mark Squibb from Live02. You can connect to Mark at live02.com. That's live02.com. You can call him at 970-658-2789. If you're listening and you don't have access to the live chat, you can always text me. We've dropped a link here in the live chat online to get more information about Mark's information on autism. He has information on sleep, getting better sleep, brain injury, a lot of things. I mean, imagine all the things oxygen are connected to, right? So you can contact Mark at live02.com, 970-658-2789. If you want the information in the paper that he has written on autism, just text me 720-303-8868. I'll make sure you get connected to it. Otherwise, you can pick it up in the chat. Now we're going to go back to Mark's slides here and talk a little bit more about respiratory apnea.
Yeah, respiratory
Go
apnea
ahead, Mark.
is one of 6. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so this is one failure mode of sleep, which is a consequence of too much inflammation in the body. We have a protocol called Sleep O2 that basically reestablishes energy production. There was a gentleman named Greg at your conference, Naturally Inspired Healing. He walked into our booth with sleep apnea, and he walked out and reported it to us a few days later that he no longer needed his CPAP machine. So this particular form of sleep apnea is absolutely addressable. It's just a matter of reversing the inflammation, which is what Live02 does. Next slide, please. Another model is basically parasympathetic stress. Okay, where if the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems are out of balance, and so when you have a stress event, your body stops breathing, and you activate the sympathetic nervous system, that causes the body to transition into a fight or flight, and sometimes you get stuck in that mode, and that you never actually drop out. So exercise is one of the aspects that causes you to properly drop out. That is another aspect of the Sleep O2 protocol or program, where you activate I'll call it fully activate the sympathetic activity side so that the body can make a clear transition back to the parasympathetic, as in rest or relaxation. This is another mechanism. Next slide, please. Another dimension is people have a lot of stress in their life. So like we put up an assessment, which is we'll share that later. But the question is, how many times a day do you get angry, annoyed, or scared in such a way that your body releases cortisols or stress hormones? A lot of these stress hormones end up, existing in the system, and they never actually get metabolized or cleared fully. So another aspect of the Sleep O2 protocol is basically to take the body into a place where these hormones get, I'll call it, either metabolized or swept out. We've actually documented I'll call it a pattern, observable pattern, when we can tell when these hormones are getting consumed. So basically as these hormones accumulate in your body, it makes it so you can't get into that deep state of sleep. Next slide, please. Another issue is lots of people have had head traumas and their brain is, has a persistent or an unresolved injury. And when the brain has an injury and part of the outside of the brain isn't working, then the brain will fail over and like the exterior, and it will fail over to the sympathetic core, which is the inside of the brain. And this is kind of the core of PTSD. But a lot of people that have a brain injury or loss of blood flow to the part of the brain as a consequence of an accident or concussion will end up in this fight or flight sympathetic mode and also have disturbed sleep. So healing the brain is
Interesting.
another utility of LiVo2 by oxygenating it at a very high level. Okay, next slide, please. And, another category of sleep dysfunction is a consequence of what's called methylation, where glutathione, big fancy word, but glutathione is the body's master detoxifying substance. And if your liver and your body are not making enough glutathione to mop up the garbage, then these toxins interfere with the nervous system, and you end up with jitters or what's called restless leg syndrome and insufficiency of these antioxidants. That will also prevent the body from going to sleep. Jesus might be something like that. Next slide, please.
Oh, I think we did. Did I lose you? You cut
No, I'm
out a
still
little
here.
bit
Can you
there.
hear me?
Oh, yeah. Now I can. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Okay,
You.
sorry.
There was a delay there.
Okay.
So is this the process of like a detox that your brain goes through in at night? Well, it's part of your sleep process.
That is exactly right. So I'm sorry for not saying that. So what happens is when you go to bed, your glutathione production ramps up. Okay, and when the glutathione ramps up is when the body goes through the major detoxification cycle. So if your body's unable to produce particularly your liver is unable to produce a sufficient amount of glutathione, then you don't have the resources available to do the normal nighttime detoxification. So the Sleep O2
And that's a
protocol also,
glymphatic detoxification of the brain. Is that
uh,
what
the
is that the
glymphatic
system?
system is involved
Okay.
in terms, but LiVo2 and the exercise process. So it's the arterial or the vascular system that drives the energy that
Mm-hmm.
drives the
Mm-hmm.
glymphatics. So the answer there is yes, and the glymphatic system is the theater where the detoxification of the neural tissue goes on. So we have another protocol called Neuro O2 that targets that particular system. But a symptom of poor sleep is a symptom of insufficient glutathione, and
Okay.
it manifests as basically an oxidative stress factor. So when your sleep system is working right, you'll go to sleep, stay asleep for a long time, you'll dream, and the next morning you'll wake up and like, whoa, where am I? And you just have that almost disorienting where the body
Mm-hmm.
completely checks out.
Now, is this
Insufficient.
why
Go ahead.
sometimes when people take glutathione, it doesn't produce a result for them? Is that why? Is because of this type of situation where they need more to be able to process the glutathione?
Yeah. So, the glutathione equation is pretty complicated. Normally, we use a combination of glutathione, EDTA, and a special form of selenium because you need the high level of selenium to
Mm-hmm.
enable the body to recycle the glutathione. So, basically glutathione goes to the liver, gets recycled, but most people are so depleted on selenium that they
Mm-hmm.
can't recycle it, so they get a fraction of the bang for the buck. So our protocol combines all of these elements along with oxygen. And so what we do is to go through and attempt to solve all of these problems simultaneously. So
Mm-hmm.
regardless of which things are broken at a particular time, you'll normally come out feeling better. The other thing I forgot to include in this presentation is cell membrane integrity, which is people that have been on a long-term diet high in polyunsaturated fats, avoiding cholesterol. All right, you
Mm-hmm.
often lack sufficient lipid integrity to build a high-quality cell membrane. And this is literally measurable with a technique called bioimpedance. And it measures the capacitance, and I'm speaking like an engineer, it measures the electrical characteristic of the body that enables it to insulate and basically hold electrical energy. So
Sure.
breakdown in the cell membranes is a part of the equation. So, and that's actually addressed in the dietary dimension of the Sleep O2 protocol as well. So actually it's actually six things that we're, targeting simultaneously with the protocol. Does that make
Where
sense?
can people, yeah, it does. Where can people get more information and contact you? Because you can actually buy a Live O2 machine for your own home, can't you?
Correct. So LiveO2 is set up as a home exercise platform. It enables you to optimize your physical performance, but we have a very substantial library of approximately 20 different strategies for optimizing sleep, brain function, and other attributes. But pursuant to your so many people out there sleep poorly, is why we
Yes.
selected this to talk today, because I think if I looked up the statistic, maybe 4 out of 10 people in America sleep well enough to not complain about I can't sleep.
I know. I see it all the time when I work with clients one on one and I do assessments. As sleep is, 4 to 5 hours at best. It's broken, and this is contributing to poor health. People underestimate the power of sleep. So if this is an issue for you, it must be remedied for you to reach optimum health. Your body needs this time to detox. You can connect to Mark at liveO2.com. I'm telling you, go to the website because there's some amazing stories on there. There's a sleep assessment. So let's check out how you're doing on your sleep. You can take that. You can text me to get it, or you can just call Mark, 970-658-2789. Thank you so much, Mark, for being on today. Everybody visit liveO2.com.